What are you doing with your hair? Are you just like making it like look good? Is that the thing?
Yeah, I'm primping.
Oh, oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm done now, though. Yeah, yours looks great. You're good
All
to
right.
go.
Well,
Okay, here we go. I bet some of those
yeah.
bloopers are going to make their way into the interview, but I'm going to officially kick us off. So, welcome to Dig Inspiration. I recently interviewed Tina Lambert, CMO and author of the book Innovation is Ugly. And we have a lot of innovation experts here at Dig, but I could not miss the chance to bring you, Paul, our CEO, our co founder, someone who's been innovating since the very early days,
Keep
to talk
going.
all things that keep going. Go
20
on.
minutes of just going on.
But thanks for joining, Paul. This is going to be fun. I mean, do we ever not have fun when we chat?
Yeah, no, we always have fun when we chat. Always.
The pun.
Always.
Well, thanks for joining. This is going to be good. So, one of the things that Tina talked about that I really it resonated with me was this idea of killing the middle, which is basically taking those ideas or those innovations that are sort of in the middle of your priority list and just getting rid of them. So, what do you think? Agree? Disagree? Discuss.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think it's just it depends on the culture of innovation that you have at the organization and how much resources you have and time. I think when you talk about big bets, it is time intensive. And so you are obviously putting a lot more faith into something that may or may not work. You don't necessarily know the outcome. You call it a big bet for a reason. Whereas the small incremental ones, I think you're kind of banking on those ones to be more successful. Now, sure enough, not everything's going to be successful, but you're trying to bank on those to be somewhat successful incrementally, small little wins. And so I'll focus on that till it makes sense. I think where Tina is right is that middle part can get really stuck in between the I don't necessarily know if it's going to work, and at the same time, it's not too big of a bet that I'm going to dedicate enough resources to it. And
Hmm.
you actually aren't able to provide them attention and the focus that you actually need to make those actually successful. They get lost. And kind of like a middle child, it probably gets lost too. I mean, I wasn't a middle child, I was the youngest, but it feels the same. But that idea of you don't necessarily have the confidence that something's going to work, but you also don't have the resources to invest in it and like you do on the big bets. So I appreciate her perspective on the idea of if you're going to focus, take a look at the prioritization across your innovation hierarchy and those that are in the middle. I think you got to place either they're big enough a bet that you're going to put the resources behind it or you kill it. I don't know. What do you
Well,
think?
I found it incredibly helpful to think about my own to-do list and say, okay, these are the things that absolutely have to happen because they are, significant bets and big deals. And then there's these small things I can just get done and sort of get out the door. And then it is that middle that like brings me down. I mean, that's the stuff that stresses me out much more. And I've looked at that middle and said, you know what? These are like prime for delegating to someone else. Like they could need to
Mm,
get done, but I could probably delegate. So I found it helpful. But the other thing that you said that kind of, sparked me is, our quadrant map in Upside that shows
mhm.
the performance of things across those two dimensions of interest and commitment. And my favorite quadrant, you know what it is?
Niche
Yes, it's niche because those are the
or
things that
or
are
niche. I don't know. How do you say it?
I say niche. But those are the things that can just be super incremental and they're not always going to be the biggest launches, but they can matter a lot to a smaller, very passionate group of people.
Yeah, I think that makes a good point. Yeah, sometimes when I look at that chart and there's that ones that are like high interest, but not necessarily like there's something about them that isn't really winning versus other ideas. You can almost argue that those are the ones that are in the middle. Like they take more time, they take more investment. You want to make them win. And that's when I get back to like the resourcing. You want to make them successful. You want to make them be a winner, but you end up spending so much time on them to try to get them to be a winner that it's just you might as well have just killed the idea in the first place. That's why I appreciate Tina's perspective on it. To me, it's a matter of focus, resources, and the ROI really on how much time you're going to spend on that middle versus the perceived outcome or the anticipated outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. So Tina shared in our conversation the story of the Tarangos launch, which happened to be a failed launch during her time at P&G. She actually had props, Paul. She had like the old canister. She came to show and tell. It was really cool. And obviously, you and I have been a part of consulting around a lot of innovations throughout our career. Do you have any memorable ones that you can share, either big successes or failures?
You were prepping me a bit on this, and I remember looking at this question, being like, "Well, I can't like talk about like client failures." And you know what? The interesting thing is that I can't. There's nothing memorable to me that was a failure. from the client side, which is actually pretty good for the fact that, maybe it's just because all the work that I did with clients ended up being successful. I don't know.
Totally. I
Probably.
mean, you work
Um,
out. So
but I think one of my memorable projects was even just looking at salty snacks. And again, this is good, kind of goes back to those incremental ideas, the relationship between texture and flavor and brand, and trying to really understand the elements of how do you win with the customer. For me, the idea, and it wasn't like it was a big aha moment, but the idea of the organization saying, finally realizing that if we almost just try to cannibalize ourselves and launch flavors that may be specific to one brand, but could actually transfer over to other brands, what you're doing is maintaining the consumer within that portfolio as opposed to
mm,
losing them. Competitive
mhm.
private labels come in, they're kind of copycatting some of these flavors. And it was almost a shift in the organization from the mentality to say that this flavor and this brand don't always have to go together. This flavor, this texture, this brand, this combination doesn't always, we can actually leverage the assets that we have within those
Mhm.
three elements and trade them off against each other and still now have more occasions for the consumer to come into our portfolio. And that was, I mean, again, it's not like it's like a mind blowing idea, but it was more of a shift in the mentality. And a lot of that was what I appreciated about it was that it was consumer driven. The
Yeah.
idea of understanding the consumer, understanding the behaviors, really taking that data and figuring out, okay, how do we actually think about our business slightly differently, as opposed to, and we're guilty of this ourselves. And when we talk about innovation, this is where I tend to get to is even as in a research company to think that, we need to do more research with our clients. We need to ask them more questions just because the clients come to us to ask questions about from their consumers. We need to do the same. And a lot of times when you end up talking to yourself as an organization, you end up missing the thing that really will drive innovation or drive success. And sometimes that's just a shift in the mentality. And when you hear it from a consumer, it really changes the way you think of your business.
Yeah, you're good about that. You're good about reminding us, "Have we gotten client feedback on this? Hey, is it worth putting in front of a couple of clients?" You're really good at that. In fact, I think that's the way you just get bonus points in a meeting is we just add that comment. We just say, "Should we get client feedback on this?"
That's all I,
Just
yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
If someone mentions it, I'm like, promotion. Yeah. Give that person a promotion.
Yeah, one of the innovations I was a part of early in my career, and I took this learning to like our own innovation. It was a food company that had developed this technology where you could have this microwavable tray, right? This think of like a microwave dinner or whatever. But it had like green beans that would be perfectly cooked and crisp, but it also had like a lasagna situation, and then it had ice cream. And so this technology, you put it in the microwave and the ice cream would still be perfectly frozen when you pulled it out of the microwave. So it was a really
Weird.
interesting technology, right? And we tested the heck out of all these prototypes and it just kept failing because turns out people don't care. Like they don't want to have this tray come out of the microwave. It's weird to them, like it was just a really interesting learning that you can have the coolest technology, sort of like the snazziest thing. And it's reminding me a lot of like all the AI innovation that fatigue that's happening right now. Because if you don't focus on what the consumer actually cares about, then you're really spinning your wheels on something that you might think is cool, but you need to like really get outside of your own head and outside of your own kind of team, input to get consumer feedback. So that's one that I learned from early on is just make sure you're not just chasing this shiny objects, right? That you're innovating with purpose and that you understand the client benefit and that remains the North Star. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons that can go into in terms of like packaging failures and things where there's the why something failed in market, and it was because it changed really the brand, the asset of the actual brand itself. And I think sometimes that's under valued. And when we think about innovations, is like how are you maintaining the essence of what it is that people are buying, but then adding kind of something to it. How can and it could be an incremental opportunity for that brand, or it could be a brand stretch into something completely new. But all those things, there needs to be fit, there needs to be purpose, there needs to be
Yep.
consumer benefit and a need that you're satisfying. And that's why I love the work that our features and innovation team does, because they also help to kind of look at those things and say how far can a brand potentially go in these different territories. Let's think about those territories and then let's leverage our internal teams and technology to test those territories. So I think there's some ways we can really get really good feedback, but iteratively, and figure out like the most successful incremental innovations.
Yeah. Yeah, they're doing
And I feel like cyber. You know, everyone talks about how like Elon Musk was talking about Cybertruck and how he said something about like not doing consumer research because he kind of and Cybertruck is like not doing well, and it
is
kind
it
of
not?
shows you.
I haven't tracked
Oh
this. I
yeah,
mean,
oh no, like the guy, they had estimated they built a plant that had production of 250,000 vehicles per year. I think there were like 20,000 in terms of sales per year. Like there's some yeah.
yeah,
And I'm not saying that, he didn't come up with a cool concept and all that stuff. It's just the level of demand to meet that cool idea.
yeah.
So that's where research really kind of helps.
Speaking of research, to take a moment to congratulate you again on the win that DIG earned, the SMR award for best use of data, right? That was tied to one of our
It,
methodologies.
it's all of our wins, Jess, all of our wins.
But that's a great example, right, of how you can use novel methods to measure that demand so that you can be prepared for what you are going to sell and not be the
Yeah.
Elon Musk. Tina also talked about like how innovation teams should be structured. And she talked about the danger of putting innovation teams on an island. She said it sounds fun, but it's like the worst idea. So I'm just curious, how share with the listeners how we think about innovation at DIG. Where do the great ideas come from? How do we make sure that we're building a sustainable innovation engine? Talk to me.
Sure. What do you want to talk about? I'm um it's a that one's tough for me because I think we've gone through so many iterations of trying to figure out the right way to innovate. So startup mentality, very entrepreneurial. Innovation comes from everywhere. That's a mantra we talk about all the time. We try to get everybody to say, everyone has great ideas and should share these ideas. And in part, we do that, and we do that well in many ways. But I think where we fall down is not having somebody who's really in charge of driving innovation within the organization. Now, the one exception I'll say is our R&D team under Joel Anderson, the data science department. They have mandates, and I talk to them all the time around here's things I want you to really research and figure out like how to solve. These are the kind of the big problems, and we prioritize those. And so those are mission driven innovation opportunities. But
Mhm.
when you think about like more blue sky opportunities or more just incremental opportunities that people are coming up with, we don't we need to have a better system of trying to drive innovation. So I hear Tina's point on, yeah, fun to have an island of team. This is the disruptive innovation team, or this is the innovation task force. But if there's nobody who's actually responsible and accountable for driving innovation inside the organization, then it tends to fall down because people tend to just rely on the things that they're used to doing. The one exception I think we're seeing right now is with the use of AI. So everyone in Dig has access to ChatGPT. And it's not necessarily innovation from a novel approach to things. It's basically leveraging tools in new ways to be more efficient at the things that you're doing. And
Mm.
people are using it in very cool ways. So it's innovation to an extent, but it's really the idea is how do we take a really cool tool and rethink how we do things in a different way? And that's very powerful because those ideas can get shared very easily.
Yeah.
But I think from a large scale innovation platform and purpose, having somebody, regardless if they're on an island or integrated in the organization, having somebody they're accountable for driving that, I think is important.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And there's the idea of delivering innovation, and there's the idea of creating the perception and the market presence of being seen as innovative. How are those two things related?
I think our clients are pretty sophisticated enough to understand and especially they're knowledgeable and they've seen a lot of things. So when you claim to be able to do something, they'll understand the level of sophistication behind it, whether it's actually true to what you say it is, if it actually is valuable, if it meets a client need. And so I think those things are very interdependent. I think if you're gonna say that you're innovative, it's because you are doing things differently. You're challenging the status quo. You're coming up with different approaches. You're testing those things with clients. You're getting their feedback. They're part of that process. They're co-creating with you, and you're kind of making that part of your actual being, your mission. I think that there's lots of organizations I think that will try to say that they're innovative and it's flashy and trust me, flash sells. But I think once clients actually see the substance behind it, more often than not, they're left underwhelmed.
Yeah, I totally agree. They can see it from a mile away. And that's one of the things I think we really believe in, right? Is that it's one thing to be innovative and another to also be validated. So to be able to do both of those things, to be future proven, if you will,
Oh,
kind of important.
well done. Yeah, and I'll these conversations. The thing is, these conversations sometimes they stress me out because then I realize how much work that there is still to do, and everyone looks at what we're doing. I think externally, again, it's really hard sometimes internally when you just look at yourselves, but I hear externally from people externally that we are innovative. We're doing great things. We're really changing the game. But it just never feels like it never feels enough to me. It always feels like, yeah, there's more we can do. That we can be better at that. We can do things differently. Let's get more structure in place here, and let's drive some real, true innovations. And so these conversations always give me a little bit of a, yeah, I gotta, I'm stressed out. I gotta go back to the gym now because I know I'm stressed out. I gotta go work off that stress.
Well, I will say, I think you are a person that it has an incredibly high bar. You have a very high expectation for yourself and for others, which is a good to be in a CEO. But yeah, you really should feel good about the way we are seen externally, and I'm glad you get to hear that feedback every now and then because it's pretty special here at Dig. It's kind of a clever combination of a lot of cool things that are working.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that you're a part of the team helping to drive that.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
Like what you heard? Share the inspiration or head to diginsights.com to learn more about what we do.